conversation and dialogue. And so the youth are actually going to give a set of ground rules for respectful communication for this process. But just so you know, what's about to happen is that we sat down with this group and folks identified, youth identified who they'd like to speak to at this table. Who do they feel is most necessary to have this open and collaborative dialogue to ensure the success not only for their own education, but also many of their peers and those to come. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call out those categories and for folks to self-identify if you're interested in joining this conversation. And so we have a few empty seats, and we'll choose a few folks to join these empty seats with us. And slowly what will happen is, as a young person wants to remove themselves from this circle, they'll go ahead and step out, and that's when an adult has the space to enter the conversation. And so we'll be assisting folks to enter the conversation slowly, one at a time, in an orderly fashion, so folks do get an opportunity to have that dialogue. But first, one reminder is that in the spirit of today's keynote, as well as the whole purpose of building and thriving communities, we want to think that multiple perspectives really encourage collaboration and encourage this process for folks within our communities to become healthy and thriving in general. And then also, we wanted to remind folks that in order for that collaboration to happen, there needs to be a healthy youth-adult dialogue. And so that's what we're trying to model today.
So if we could have 4 of our youth choose to leave the circle now. We the conference founders identified 2 individuals, adults that they wanted in the circle, and the youth identified others and some individuals. So representing teachers is going to be our keynote speaker, Linda, and then Mayor Adams and Doug Stam will be representing Mayor Adams city officials, Doug Stam representing funders, and Carol Smith will be representing superintendents, and the rest will come from the audience. So we can have our 4 adults join and have 4 youth choose to step out. And while they're doing that, if you all want to stand up and start presenting the ground rules for the audience.
Okay, so the first ground rule is first before seconds. And that means that if it's your first time that you're going to speak, you should be given the floor before someone who has already spoken, and this would be their second or third time speaking, just so that everyone's voice is represented equally.
We have the second one, which is do not treat us, the youth, as a baby. We would like to be talked to in a respectful tone of voice, body language, as well as do not overtalk us because all of our opinions matter.
A third ground rule is that when we have this conversation, it is easier for us to really come to common ground when we add an experience or an example to what we're saying or to our opinion.
All right. Another one is we would really appreciate if you be open and attentive and listen even with your body. So be aware of your body language. When a student is saying something or anyone is saying something, watch your body language. Be careful if someone says something that you don't really like. Don't let your body answer in a negative way. So we have an example. Me and Luke are going to do an example. So I'm the teacher, Luke's the student, and there we go.
I really like how teachers really show me instead of tell me, because I'm not really that kind of learner. I'm a visual learner, and I learn in different ways, and I'm sure there's other students out there.
I'm sure that students don't. So when I interrupt him and when I roll my eyes or don't even give him any attention, we would like to watch that. Please. Thank you.
Another one is please consider youth in a circle. When we have a discussion, we all here to hear each other's experience. So please just consider it in the circle as a discussion. So.
Okay, so something we have on the Maloma Youth Commission is something that we call spear fingers, and it's when we agree with something. When somebody says something you like or that you agree with, you do spear fingers. Like, for example, I really like the cafeteria food at school. So it's like a really great way to show that you agree with someone, and also since the time span is really short, it's also a really great way so you don't have to repeat what has already been said. So yeah, it's great.
Also, this is not meant to be a debate. It's not youth versus adults or adults versus youth. This conversation is meant to be productive. So.
And look at that, they're already doing their ground rules. And then the final ground rule is that when a young person enters the circle, so they will tap an adult on the shoulder, and that's the cue for the adult to get up and join our, what we're calling the dugout. Once that youth enters the circle, they automatically gain the floor because they're joining because they've heard something they really want to respond to. So, what I'd like now is anyone in the room who identifies as a parent, could you stand up? Okay. Now, anyone who identifies as a parent and would like to engage in a public dialogue videotaped and put on TV, please remain standing. Okay. Sumitra, do you want to choose someone to join our circle?
Sure. There are many, but
One.
I'm really sorry. I have to choose one. So, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone who identifies as a school counselor, could you please stand up? I know we have at least one in this audience. Look at that! Are you all right being part of the circle? Oh, there's another one, I'm sorry. We do have a choice. Is that all right? Principals, any school principals with us today? School board members. Two over here. Any other school board members? One way at the back. What districts?
Park Rose.
Reynolds.
Portland.
You will take Portland, please.
Anyone who is a Sun School manager, works with Sun Schools, somebody who can represent Sun Schools.
Angela.
Excellent. And business leaders. Anyone who sees himself as a business owner, representative of a business organization. Ken, Judy. What do you guys say? All right. And I will just say that we had a list of about 20 different categories. Those categories were the ones prioritized by the young people themselves. So these were the adults that they most wanted to hear from in their dialogue. So now that we have our adults and our youth chosen, the question for the adult fishbowl is pretty simple. What did you hear? Specifically, how does it connect or challenge what you heard from our keynote speaker? And how does it inform our efforts to improve educational success for students from cradle to career? So what did you hear in the youth circle, and how does it inform our cradle to career conversation, as well as how it might connect with what our keynote speaker had to say?
Hello. All right, I'm Doug Stam. I'll give this a quick shot. First of all, congratulations. Very wonderful insights to hear from each of you. And what I heard that supported what I believe in some of the work that we do is that education is a very individual experience depending on where you come from, where you are, where you enter school, where you are, whether you're an AB student or an IB student, whether you're struggling with certain subjects, and what sort of home you come from in terms of do you have parents who are comfortable in the schools or not comfortable in the schools, either because of language differences, maybe they didn't complete high school themselves and they're a bit intimidated by it. So to me, I think that where it ties in with the cradle to career is we're talking about supports to deal with that individuality, and which we would expect in a diverse society. And we deal with this in our workplace every day, is from early childhood learning all the way through 20. So if we take P through 20, that we find programs that are effective, like in this case SEI, which by the way the Meyer Trust has supported for 15 years straight and will continue to support. But it's only one of many programs that addresses individual needs, and that in Cradle to Career what we have to do is make sure that we get right the continuum all the way across, and that we allow students and encourage and empower students to move at the rate at which they are comfortable in moving, and not just promote them along or allow them to drop out.
So I'll add to that. I also heard right at the beginning when we were talking, you were talking about what made you feel successful in school. Each one of you called out your relationship with another organization that was a partner organization, and we heard SEI, we heard Step Up, we heard IRCO, we heard Apano, and I feel like part of what that reinforces for me is the importance of us really building those relationships with our community organizations, which is all about what Cradle to Career is about, is how are we intentionally making sure we're building supporting relationships with partners, but it's also the quality of how are they engaged with students and how is that available to students as part of your school experience. So I heard that as a really pivotal thing. I also heard equity of opportunity being called out and really visible as you were all talking about what your own school experiences are. And where you have them and how they're different, and that as students you want to make sure you have access to the same things across schools, as well as the opportunity to choose the things that are specifically personal to you that may not be at your school. So the right to choose as well. So, and those were important things for me to hear, both in terms of what we're intentionally doing in Cradle to Career to build a web that's beyond the school and how we're using out of school time. Also, what we've been doing looking at our high schools, trying to build equity of opportunity into our high schools and access to advanced learning opportunity, as well as the supports to have students able to do it. So I heard things that resonated that I think were building on our strengths.
I think a number of you said it a number of times in different ways, and that is that you want high expectations, a lot of encouragement, and you want access to the resources that you need, whether you're a high-performing student, whether you're a smart, high-performing student, but like me, when I was a student, needed extra time to sort of take things in. I'm not a good book learner, so I needed to learn in my own way. I also heard, which resonates with me as well as not a great book learner, and that is that school should be interesting, and whether that's sports or arts and culture or what have you, in addition to the very important academic learning, there is very important learning that can happen in the school and in the community that keeps you motivated to stay in.
So we heard a lot of the same things. I want to add that I heard a lot of people talk about how important it is to have access to caring teachers and people outside of school, including bilingual teachers, which Eduardo mentioned as an important piece of that. And I heard the conversation about issues in access and inequality, to challenging and rigorous courses, AP and IB, to quality teaching, to extracurriculars, which sometimes have costs associated with them that some kids are not able, or some families are not able to pay. And also the inequality that comes, and you talked about this for English learners who may be in ESL classes and don't get access to the general course context and system. In California, we call that the ESL ghetto, and it is a challenge in a lot of schools. I wanted to ask Felicia a question because she talked about the fact that the style has to change. Those were your words, and it was around the issue of teaching style. And I want to ask you, what is what kind of teaching style do you like to see in a class? What is supportive, and what do you think needs to change?
A supportive teaching style to me, from a teacher to a student, would have to be that you're not ignoring the fact that not everybody is engaging or picking up quickly. You're not continuing to teach the material and you see and you know everybody's not understanding. I feel that if you took the time to take a subject and break it down into its components instead of giving 3 to 4 subjects and all in one day and expect a student to walk away with some knowledge of every one. I feel that a teacher needs to kind of focus on one thing, learn what their students have advantage and disadvantage, and I feel a lot of students don't, I feel a lot of teachers don't know their students' advantages and disadvantages in the materials that they are teaching. So I feel that a connection more than just a teacher and student needs to go deeper into knowing their students as well. I know teachers see a lot of students every day, but it's kind of like you can read it on file, or most kids have some type of IEP or something.
Whoa.
I guess I would like to talk about what I heard and what I saw, and that was eliminating race, class, and the third one, if somebody can help me, that you guys had listed up there, race, class, and
socioeconomic.
property, I guess. I would like to know where and when on you guys' timeline that has been eliminated out of Portland Public Schools or other school districts, because I have not seen race, which is a touchy subject, eliminated out of schools. I've not seen poverty eliminated out of schools. I've seen some where we, of different races, yeah, I can eat a meal because I'm low income, so you guys have, what do you guys call it? Free and reduced lunch. But then again, I'm there to eat, but my main subject is to be about my class and my education, and I don't see where I am on the same level as somebody of a different race, when on paper you guys are always subjecting a race of color to be the lowest. So I guess my question is, when or how are you guys implying that into the schools to be eliminated?
Sounds like my question. I guess I'm going to tie this back actually to this morning and listening to Linda's remarks when she was talking about the 70s being the closest to when we'd actually ever closed the gap, and what else was going on in the community in terms of poverty reduction programs that were also in place at the same time, and that poverty levels are now half again, what'd you say, half again? Almost twice as what they were at that time, which is very evident to me, and that we've in fact gone backwards since the 70s, and closing the achievement gap has been a huge issue that we're making very visible. So I think what we are doing at this moment, Felicia, we're looking at our data and making it very visible, so everyone in the school system and the community knows exactly what it is we're looking at. And in our school district, we're doing some things that are about how we're preparing the adults to be ready to do the work. So we're looking at policy level, so that's really looking at, do we have policies that are barriers for closing that achievement gap? And our board has taken that on as an issue. As for the first time, we don't already have an equity policy. We're building one. We've got our entire staff of almost 5,000 people right now going through what we're calling courageous conversations with Pacific Education Group, and it's really looking at race and how it impacts the adults and how you work with your students, and your own relationship to your own race and race of others, and how does that impact your teaching, and how do we build culturally responsive teaching practices. We've got work going on in our human resources department, looking at how we recruit and support and develop our teaching staff. And then what we're also doing is looking at, amongst our principals, looking at the data. So what schools are really being successful with students and which ones are not. And we're making visible, here are schools that are really rocking it and really knocking it out of the park, and here are the schools that aren't. And so how are we building on the practices that are being successful, and how are we having other schools work to aspire to those practices? So I think and I could keep going, but it's a very active conversation amongst the staff at Portland Public Schools at this moment that's engaging the entire staff regardless of your job. Board, superintendent, teachers, custodians, I mean everyone in Portland Public Schools is engaged in this conversation. Timeline I don't have.
Okay, so I guess this is still a conversation and not as of an action in the school, is my understanding.
Well, part of what we're looking at when we're saying we're looking at data and looking at what are practices that are being successful, we're looking at how do we build on the practices that are being successful with students, and how are we getting rid of the ones that aren't. So that's active, and we're actively looking at the data and looking at how we build student success, how are we building teaching practice, how are we supporting teachers to get better at what they do and to be more effective, how are we getting teachers into each other's classrooms so that they can build on their successes as they see the work of other teachers. Actually, we're creating teacher development time that is more about teachers working with each other, so rather than pull out with the spray and get, or whatever you called it, the spray and pray, we call it drive-by, like one-shot teacher development. We're really trying to create time on site at the school in the morning where teachers get to work with each other on getting better at what they do. So,
if I could add to Felicia, your very good question and the superintendent's great answer. And I know that based on my work in the last 2 years, that this school board and this superintendent are doing taking more concrete actions and being more accountable and trying to figure out the points of unconscious and conscious stereotyping, racism, which we're all vulnerable to. I do not believe you grew up in this sort of mass media culture, and all of us have. We are all affected by that. But I think it relates directly back to the reason why we're doing this. Community, schools, academia, private sector partnership, like we are, cradle to career, and that is that Portland has to change, the Multnomah County has to change, as well as efforts in the schools. And I believe that Portland has the potential to be the city of the most equal opportunity, of the least stereotyping, of the least racism, but we're not there yet, and we have a lot of work to do. We are, though, the kind of locale, city, county, where in other areas that 15, 20 years ago were deemed impossible to confront, have been confronted and we have succeeded at. Our recycling, our garbage, we went from zero to the best, recycling. We have an environmental ethic, has always been there, but we built on that. I think Portlanders do, and folks in this area do have a deep sense of fair treatment. I think there's a lot of unconscious racism, some overt racism as well, but we have to work on it and invest in it, and I think we can make it, the folks going into the schools, whether they're parents or students or teachers or what have you, I think they can come in more enlightened. And so in the next couple of months at the city, we're going to be rolling out a very, hopefully not controversial, but a very ambitious strategy as part of our Portland plan, strategic plan for the city for the next 5 years, to focus on this issue of racism and of inequality in Portland. It's holding the city back a lot. It's holding our ability to educate ourselves back.
I'd just like to add one thing to that. I think your point is really an important one. Your question's an important one, and it's very important. We're here today to talk about Portland Metro schools, but if you go back to Dr. Hammond's presentation.